Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is Dustin Bellinger. I'm doing a response video for Yankees cards. Hey Jerome, how you doing? Jerome's topic was for us to list our top 5 hated Yankees. Gonna try and do that for him here. I wanted to kind of create a list that would be a little bit unique, so I'm not going to have some of the usual suspects and what I think others would put on their list. So, no Alex Rodriguez, no Roger Clemens, no Giambi on this one, no Bucky Dent, no Aaron Boone type guys. All right, here we go with our top 5. I'm going to start with the man upstairs himself, Mr. George Steinbrenner. Petty tyrant and abusive bully personality, just all around rather distasteful person. Basically exiled from baseball once and would have been best if he would never been allowed back. He's the one most responsible for creating the culture and the personality of the Yankees organization institutionally that I dislike, that I find the most disagreeable and unlikable when it comes to them. So there you go with number 5. And moving on to number 4, I'm going with Goose Gossage. This has not a whole lot to do with him as player on the Yankees, has more to do with him as what he's become now, and that's essentially just a bitter old man ragging, yelling, complaining about how everything that's changed is terrible and nothing is as good as it was when he was playing. It's old, and I just don't want to hear it from him. I don't want to hear this elitist attitude and opinions on who belongs in the Hall of Fame and who doesn't, because if I'm going to have an elitist attitude about the Hall of Fame, I would start looking at a guy that is in the Hall of Fame as a relief pitcher and point out the fact that you become a relief pitcher because you aren't good enough to be a starting pitcher. So being in the Hall of Fame as a relief pitcher is like getting put on Mount Everest as the best vice president of the United States. Take that old man attitude and can it, dude. Moving on then to number 3, a legend of the Yankees in Mr. Andy Pettitte. Now, if you guys are going to have hate and animosity and angst towards all the other PED users, you got to come for Andy too. Now, Andy Pettitte has the eyes of a goat, as was once famously said on the Jim Rome show many years ago. And I was never a big fan of him, found him to be a bit overrated. If you're gonna be anti all the PED users, then you've gotta have just as much hate and animosity towards Andy Pettitte, no matter how many playoff games he won for you. Otherwise, it's just hypocrisy. So Andy Pettitte's number 3. Moving on to number 2, and the captain himself, Mr. Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter's a hell of a ball player, worthy Hall of Fame candidate, exceptional shortstop, but when you compare him to shortstops of this era in Barry Larkin, Cal Ripken Jr., and Robin Yount, all of which won league MVP titles, Derek Jeter never won a league MVP. Now, even Phil Rizzuto won a league MVP as a Yankee shortstop. So I have a hard time understanding why I am constantly seeing Derek Jeter listed as one of the greatest shortstops of all time, and possibly second to only Honus Wagner, when he doesn't measure up as being dominant offensively. Shortstops that were able to be league MVPs and were considered the best players on their team. And I don't think that Derek Jeter was ever considered the best player on his team unless it was a season when they didn't make the playoffs. And he certainly isn't even close to being among the best defensive shortstops in his era. Certainly nowhere near as fine a defensive shortstop as Ozzie Smith or even Omar Vizquel. So if Derek Jeter were drafted in any other city except New York, and as a Yankee really, I don't know that his career would be looked on as nearly as exceptional as it is treated by the fact that he was a Yankee and that they won some championships while he was there and he contributed to those. But hey, let's talk about one of those playoff contributions, a home run that never should have been allowed to be, but not for the actions of probably one of the biggest douche canoes in the history of sports. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Jeffrey Maier. Now, you're just lucky I can't put you on this list when you're not even an actual player or having any official connect. But let me tell you, when it comes to hate for the Yankees, of all the people I have a hatred for, I probably have more hate for you, Jeffrey Maier, than all of these other players combined. So here we are, we're to the top of the list now, and number one is probably one of the biggest names I could come up with, and it's Mr. Joe DiMaggio. Really, this selection here has a lot more to do with what we are as fans than what Joe DiMaggio is as a player and a human being. I fault us as fans for this more than I do him for being a human being. We as fans seem to have really hard time putting historical perspective on those that came before. And we want to ascribe virtue and purity to people in a previous time that just isn't really true. Joe DiMaggio is kind of a classic example in that, treated as a prince as if he was practically royalty. And when you get down to it, as a human being, there's a lot about Joe DiMaggio that isn't a nice story. We want to act like the players from his era didn't care about the money and that they all were playing just for the love of the game, and every time they were always sacrificing for the benefit of the team, and it's just a load of bull. There were plenty of times that Joe DiMaggio put himself above the interests of the team. There were lots of times during his career that Joe DiMaggio was fighting for every dollar he could get as a player, both on his contract and in endorsements. And he never once ever turned down a dime that could be had. And the only reason he didn't get more is he just didn't have the leverage available to take more. But if he was there, he would have taken it all. If you look at the history of Joe DiMaggio's life, it's just filled with pettiness and greed and selfishness. And the man spent the last several decades of his life attempting to live on basically a slipstream of gratuities and comps. He was taking from anybody and everybody that he could take a dollar from, and he didn't care about anything other than just grabbing every last dime that was out there to be grabbed. And if he had to bend the rules or ignore the law to keep a few extra of those dimes, he didn't have a single problem with doing that either. Is Joe DiMaggio even the only one from that era? No, not even close. But really, he's the biggest name and the one that we probably put on the highest pedestal. And so I just decided to, for my list, I would just kind of call that out and say the legend and the lore and the nostalgia just doesn't really measure up what these men really were back then. So there it is. There's my list. The top 5 hated Yankees, plus a little bonus hate and bile there for Mr. Jeffrey Maier. Yeah, Jeffrey, if you're out there listening, you can go to hell. Still, after all these years. All right, everybody, I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Take care.